Time. Time is something I'm thinking about quite a bit this morning because I'm running short on time for a few things. It is a podcast morning, so JT and I need to keep an eye on the clock to make sure we log on at the appropriate time to interview the author that we're speaking to. Once that's done, I will have a time where I will go to visit my family. So I need to leave at a certain hour or minute in order to get to their house when I say I will. And I'm also thinking about time today because June 4th is the 45th anniversary of my high school graduation. And I cannot believe we have been out of high school for almost half a century now. It's coming up very soon. And when 17-year-old me stood on the stage giving my salutatory speech, I had no idea what was in store for me. The time stretched out in what looked like an endless span where I had no idea when or where I would end up at a certain place. I did not intend to go right to college because I had been offered a scholarship that I turned down. And, so time was my own. And what I did not know when I stood on that stage was that a year and a day later, I would be marrying a man I didn't even know yet. So tomorrow, June 5th, is the 44th anniversary of our marriage. JT and I also had no idea what was in store when we stood together at the altar of the old St. Teresa's Church here in Carson City. And then we left to go to the Midwest, and a year and a month, almost a month later, we had our first child. So when I stood on that stage 45 years ago, I did not know that a year and a day later I would be getting married, and a little over 2 years later, I would be a mother. In the meantime, a lot of things happened to me on my own schedule, basically. I did end up taking some college courses, even though I had turned down the scholarship because my family was trying to encourage me to do something with my life other than working at Wendy's. And my grandparents suggested law, which I chose not to pursue because really I did not feel I had the personality for that. But they had a very specific timetable for me. They thought I should go to school, get a degree, get a job, but they also thought I should get married because none of them had any hesitation whatsoever when I announced that my then boyfriend had proposed to me. They actually began planning our marriage before I had even said yes to the proposal. But the timetable that they had maybe envisioned for me uh, just kind of worked out in its own way. I don't really think anything that I've achieved in my life has been along what society expects of a person because I did finally get a bachelor's degree. First, I got two associate degrees, though, and then I got a bachelor's degree. I was considered a non traditional student because I wasn't going to school at the time that most people did. I was an older student, married, had a family, and worked full time while I was going to school. So that's considered non traditional because it's not on society's timetable. So, time is something that we are ruled by throughout the course of our lives. I think we all remember in childhood how the days seemed to endlessly stretch out before us and all kinds of adventures awaited. I'm not sure if modern kids feel the same thing because they tend to spend more of their time online, on computer games, on phones with friends. Whereas when I was a kid, and perhaps you as well, we would actually get up with the sun and go outside, and we would stay out until the sun went down. So we weren't really ruled so much by the clock, but by the sun. And that's still a measure of time, but it's not quite the strict measure that we tend to follow when we're looking at the clock. And one of the biggest misconceptions I had about time was that when I retired, time would return to what it had been when I was a child, that I would have endless hours to do all the things I wanted to do. However, as an older person, I perceive time much differently than I did as a kid. And those endless hours that I remember from the halcyon days of my youth aren't there anymore. So I can still achieve the things I want to achieve, but perhaps not as quickly as I expected because I have less time in my own perception and limited energy to do them. So that misconception that I would be doing all the things I had done as a child again with more freedom because I didn't have parents watching over me turned out not to be the case. And I'm sure anyone of any age at this point understands how I feel about the passage of time because time does go so quickly. I mentioned that yesterday, and we're already into the 6th month of the year. That it seems like the holidays will be here again just around the corner, even though we just seem to have celebrated them. And I mean, Christmas holidays, of course, the winter holidays, but time is something that really will mess with your brain. And time is one of the things that I've been exploring in my paranormal romances because I am writing about older characters. And I have included some historic elements, especially in Passion Restored, where there are two couples, but they're separated, excuse me, by more than a century of time. And when I was a kid, a century seemed like forever. But now that I'm more than half a century old, it's like the blink of an eye. I could easily see myself living for another 40-ish years and hitting the century mark for myself. Whereas as a child, I could not see that or I could not comprehend that. So time is a construct. Time is something that's very relative. Time is something that is very subjective. We perceive time differently throughout the course of our lives. And I think it's a shame that we are ruled so much by time, though I understand why. One of the reasons we have time zones was to help facilitate rail travel, from what I've heard, because you would want a train to leave one place at a specific time and arrive at another place at a specific time. I'm not quite sure how that works, but that's what I've read. And I haven't gone too deeply down that research rabbit hole, so I haven't verified it. But that's one of the things I heard, that time zones were a construct of rail travel. Also, the Industrial Revolution kind of brought about our modern schedules that once people stopped working for themselves on their property, they had to go out and work perhaps in a company where the boss expected everybody to show up at a specific time and they would all be released at a specific time. Same thing for school, of course. And in a sense, doing that is reasonable because you want people to arrive and leave when they should. But we have such a rigid timeline these days. We have so many time restrictions. People have so many challenges related to time, specifically when you're in that point of your life where you're doing everything. You may be going to school, you may be working, you may be raising a family, you may be taking care of elderly parents. And thinking about getting all of that done every day within a 24-hour period and still managing to sleep every once in a while, it's just mind boggling. Yet so many of us do it. And no wonder we're all exhausted. So, time. Time is everything and time is nothing. I mean, I know that's kind of a weird, random comment, but we can function without time, without clocks. We can work on what nature provides. We can, for example, I've read also that humans didn't tend to sleep through the course of the night for the entire 7 or 8 hours. In bygone days, people would sleep in shifts. They would sleep in the evening after the sun went down. They would be awake during the night for a few hours, and then they would return to sleep for a few hours before the dawn. So the way we schedule our days now is much different than what our ancestors did. And I think we need to be less focused on time. And I think that would be good for all of us, but I also don't foresee it happening because time is so deeply ingrained in our lives now that unfortunately I don't think we can go back. So, like I said, time is on my mind today for many reasons. Of course, I mentioned my high school graduation, my wedding anniversary, and the birth of my oldest child being in such a short span of 3 years. And at the beginning of that 3 year span, I had no idea how that timetable was going to play out. So it's just interesting how things work out. And I think we all need to take a step back every once in a while, stop looking at the clock, and just allow ourselves to be, because everything happens in its own time. And the things that we plan don't always work on a schedule, they don't always follow the clock or the calendar. And that's okay. The other reason, of course, that I'm focused on time so much right now is that I am working on a deadline for Battleborn Bride to get it back to my editors in less than a week now. And I've done this to myself, of course, as I've mentioned, but I'm very focused on time and how much or how little I have to get that work done. So today I encourage you to take a step back, maybe put down your phone, don't look at the clock if you can, and just take a few minutes to be, or take a break. Don't even count the minutes, just rest and let life happen, because I think deadlines aren't always the best idea. So I hope you are having a wonderful day so far. It is Thursday, June 4th, 2026. We will be heading into the weekend here very soon, what will be a busy weekend for me. I hope you have fun plans and that the weather is pleasant where you are. And I will check in again with you tomorrow. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is The Life of a Writer. Take care.